We begin in Washington, where Senate Republicans are launching a new inquiry into the presidency of Joe Biden, focusing on a tool that is both common and now controversial, the autopen. Citing concerns over what they describe as the former president's mental decline, a group of senators is seeking to create a detailed paper trail of his autopen usage. Leading the effort is Senator Schmitt of Missouri, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution. He has formally requested access to a wide range of Biden-era documents under the Presidential Records Act. The autopen, a device that replicates a person's signature, is often used for routine documents. However, Senator Schmitt argues that its increased use for significant items like pardons and executive orders raises questions about the validity of those actions. The central concern is whether President Biden himself directed the use of the autopen for each signature, or if decisions were made by his inner circle. This request follows a recent Senate hearing on the matter and a closed-door interview with Neera Tanden, a former top Biden aide. In her testimony, Tanden stated that she inherited a system for autopen authorization from previous administrations and that she never had reason to question that President Biden was in command. Republicans, however, remain unconvinced. The documents they are seeking include memos on autopen procedures, lists of who was authorized to use the device, and staff emails related to its use, particularly in the final months of the administration. Senator Schmitt has stated that the ultimate goal is to gather enough information to determine if new legislation, or even a constitutional amendment, is necessary to address the scenario of a mentally incapacitated president. The request seeks access to the records by mid-July. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is shifting focus to the economy, participating in an event later today centered on a new tax cut and spending bill. This move signals a renewed emphasis on his signature economic policies as he continues to shape his political platform. The event is expected to see the president outline his vision for the nation's fiscal future, likely drawing a sharp contrast with the economic strategies of the past 4 years. Observers anticipate he will advocate for extending or making permanent provisions from his 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, many of which are set to expire. The discussion comes amid a broader national debate on federal spending, the national debt, and persistent inflation. President Trump is expected to argue that lower taxes and reduced regulation are the most effective engines for economic growth, a message that resonated with his base during his first term. The specifics of the proposed bill are still emerging, but today's event will offer a clearer picture of his priorities. From corporate tax rates to individual income brackets, it represents a strategic effort to frame the economic conversation around his core principles of economic prosperity and fiscal responsibility. Turning now to the Supreme Court, which issued a significant ruling today that tightens the timeline for migrants challenging their deportation orders. In a narrow 5-4 decision, the justices found that a 30-day window to appeal a final order of removal begins as soon as that initial order is issued, not after subsequent legal challenges are resolved. The case, which centered on a Jamaican national named Pierre Riley, highlights the complex and often lengthy journey through the immigration court system. Riley, who came to the U.S. 3 decades ago and was convicted of drug felonies, faced deportation in 2021. He argued against his removal to Jamaica under the Convention Against Torture, claiming his life would be in danger from a drug kingpin there. Initially, an immigration judge agreed and granted him withholding of removal, meaning he could be sent to another country, but not Jamaica. However, the government appealed, and the Board of Immigration Appeals overturned that decision, reinstating his deportation to Jamaica. When Riley then took his case to a federal appellate court, he was told he was too late. The court said the 30-day clock started when he first received his removal orders over a year earlier. Writing for the majority, Justice Samuel Alito acknowledged the legitimate practical concerns. but said the law was written with the expectation that such cases would be handled quickly. But in a sharp dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor argued the ruling defied logic, stating that the court was effectively requiring an appeal to be filed months or even years before the order being challenged even exists. The Supreme Court also handed down a major decision in a long-running battle over public funding for healthcare providers. In a 6-3 ruling, the court sided with South Carolina, affirming the state's power to block Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood clinics. This case has been closely watched as a bellwether for state-level fights over abortion access and healthcare choices. However, the court's decision was not a direct ruling on abortion itself, but a technical interpretation of federal law. The central question was whether individual Medicaid patients have the right to sue a state that restricts their choice of a qualified healthcare provider. Planned Parenthood argued that South Carolina's move to defund its clinics violated federal law by denying patients this choice. Writing for the majority, Justice Neil Gorsuch concluded that the specific provision in question does not unambiguously grant individuals a personal right to sue the state under the Civil Rights Act of 1871. He wrote that the typical remedy for such a violation would be for the federal government, specifically the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to withhold Medicaid funds from the state, not for individuals to bring private lawsuits. This ruling is seen as a significant victory for conservative states seeking to direct public funds away from organizations that provide abortions, and it could set a precedent for similar legal challenges across the country. Finally, the U.S. Department of Justice has launched a formal civil rights investigation into the University of California system, one of the nation's largest and most prestigious public university networks. The probe will examine whether the university's system-wide efforts to promote diversity among its faculty violate federal anti-discrimination laws. At the heart of the investigation is a program known as the UC 2030 Capacity Plan, along with related initiatives at the campus level. The Justice Department is seeking to determine if these programs effectively create unlawful employment quotas based on race and sex. Such practices would be in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits employment discrimination. In announcing the investigation, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon stated that public employers are bound by these federal laws and that institutional directives using race, powers, and sex-based hiring practices expose them to significant legal risk. The investigation signals a growing scrutiny from federal authorities on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs in higher education and the workplace, questioning whether their implementation aligns with federal civil rights protections.